Shall we begin? After Oliver's conversation with Jimmy L., he came back inside, swiped 3 of the double chocolate pecan cookies Mama had baked earlier, and then retreated to his bedroom for some Biederman brainstorming time. Being the only boy among 4 sisters was not easy, but there was one perk. Oliver was the only one in the family who had a room to himself. Indeed, it was a tiny walk-in closet turned bedroom, just big enough to hold his loft bed and a narrow desk underneath it. 5 years ago, Uncle Arthur arrived, unannounced, wearing a tool belt and armed with a power drill. Uncle Arthur declared that if Oliver was to survive being the only boy among many sisters, he needed 2 things, an imagination and a place of his own to escape to. His uncle proceeded to install bookshelves on every inch of available open wall space in the room, while Papa looked on in wonder at the blur of construction. From that day on, Uncle Arthur sent Oliver books on a monthly basis. Books about superheroes and Greek mythology and pirates and space exploration and presidents. Now, walking into Oliver's room was like entering a miniature library that someone happened to live in. An hour later, Oliver had done 0 brainstorming. Rather, he was so deep into his book, Robert Louis Stevenson's Treasure Island, that he didn't hear Mama calling him to dinner. He was Jim Hawkins, struggling to board the ship after cutting the anchor loose, only to be confronted by the wicked pirate Israel Hands. "Oliver!" his sisters yelled, crashing into his sacred quiet bedroom. Oliver jumped at the intrusion before realizing that, 1, he was not Jim Hawkins, and 2, he was not on a pirate ship. He lifted the book right in front of his face. "Leave me alone." Lainey Bunny hopped over to Oliver and threw her arms around him. "I love you, Ollie," she declared, planting 4 wet kisses on his cheek. "Time for dinner." "Ugh," Oliver said, scrubbing his cheek with his sleeve. "Long John Silver would maroon you for such despicable behavior." Lainey grabbed Oliver's hand and tried to yank him to his feet, budging him not one bit. She did, however, manage to trip over his left knee and knock down a pile of comic books stacked by his desk. Lainey emerged from the comic book avalanche, still gripping Oliver's hand. "Come on, dinner time. Mama made cheesy bread." Oliver's stomach rumbled. The double chocolate pecan cookies he'd eaten an hour earlier, a distant memory. Despite the lure of piracy, he decided that dinner would be a good idea. Together, the Vanderbeekers children clambered down the steps to the kitchen, all talking at once. "Ah, the sound of my graceful children coming down the stairs. Delightful," Papa called from the kitchen. Mama turned toward her children and pointed a canary yellow spatula with a glob of meringue cream at them. "Attention! I need this table set pronto." The meringue cream dripped off the spatula and splattered on the floor, right next to Franz, who was lurking around the kitchen hoping for such a miracle. The kids rushed around, banging drawers and dropping utensils. Finally, the table was set, and food was placed in the middle, and people were seated. Then Oliver got up because he wanted ice in his water. Then Lainey insisted on rummaging through the silverware drawer for her special soup spoon. When everyone was seated again, the family held hands. Papa said a quick blessing over the food, and dinner began. "So," Oliver said, jumping right into the very topic at the forefront of everyone's minds. "I don't know about you, but I'm feeling like we need to see the Biederman, before we move." He looked at his parents with his innocent face. Papa glanced at Mama. He's trying to look innocent. Something's up. Mama sighed and looked at Oliver. "What are you planning to do to that poor man?" "What? Nothing. Why is everyone looking at me like that?" Oliver reached over the table and rifled through the slices of cheesy bread, searching for the biggest piece. "I'm just saying, the Biederman should be a man and show his face to us at least one time before he evicts us. We need an explanation." "It's Mr. Biederman, and he's not evicting us. He's not renewing our lease," Mama said. Issa spoke up. "I've always wondered what he looks like. Is he short, tall? What color hair does he have?" "What types of things is he interested in?" Jessie chimed in. "Does he like cute little bunnies?" asked Lainey, bits of cheesy bread escaping from her mouth. What about Christmas carols? Or do you know if he's Jewish? Asked Oliver. For that, he got a tick under the table from two different sources. Based on the synchronicity and the force of the kicks, he was pretty sure they came from the twins. I know absolutely nothing about him, Mama said. You know how private he is. Every time I've had to go into his apartment, Papa said, he tells me to let myself in with my super key and closes himself into his bedroom until I'm done. You have a super key? Said Lainey, amazed. Does it have powers? Is it magic? He means the superintendent key, Oliver said, rolling his eyes. I think this whole situation is weird, Jessie said, banging her soup spoon on the table. We've lived here for 6 years and haven't seen him once. Then he kicks us out of our home without even getting to know us? Mr. Jones said he used to work at City College before we moved in, Hyacinth said. Mama cleared her throat, then said the words no one wanted to hear. We need to start packing tomorrow. Around the table, each Vanderbeeker finished dinner, but the food tasted like dust and left them empty and unsatisfied. After clearing the table and loading the dishwasher, the kids headed upstairs as the brownstone creaked mournfully in the silence. Off to the rep, asked Issa. Desperate times call for desperate measures, replied Jessie. Issa opened her closet door, pulled out an armload of hoodies, and passed them out. While everyone zipped up the thick sweatshirts, Jessie gathered the rep bag, or perhaps it's REP, the REP bag, and duffel that was filled with fleece blankets, along with a large 2-liter bottle that used to hold soda water but was now filled with tap water. With what Oliver believed was superhuman strength, he yanked up the twins' bedroom window, and the kids climbed out onto the fire escape. Issa hitched Lainey on her back and started up the groaning metal stairs to the REP, otherwise known as the Roof of Epic Proportions. There were 2 ways to get up to the REP, but the other way required the Vanderbeeker kids to use the ladder directly across from the Biederman's door. They had never used that roof entrance for obvious reasons. Be careful, Issa reminded them. She said that same thing in her listen to me or else tone every time they went to the roof. First, Issa and Lainey passed Miss Josie in Mr. Jeet's living room. Hi, Miss Josie, Lainey chirped, tapping the window and waving when Miss Josie looked up from her television show. Next, they crept past the Biederman's window, which was covered by blackout curtains. Finally, they emerged onto the roof. The roof floor was not the typical concrete sandpaper surface that covered most roofs in New York City. Right before the Vanderbeekers arrived, the 100-year-old roof was replaced and then topped off with current-colored ceramic tiles. The tiles made the rooftop welcoming and soundproof. Nevertheless, the kids knew to tread in the same manner that they did when visiting one another's bedrooms late at night, being careful not to wake their parents. They were certain the Biederman could not hear them, because he would definitely have said something about it, and not in a nice way either. Water wall to launch with your permission, Jessie said to Issa when she got to the roof, lifting the water bottle out of the REP bag and holding it up. The sky glowed a Persian blue, and the black silhouettes of the building gave the neighborhood a fantasy quality, like the chimney sweep scene in the Mary Poppins movie. Go for it, boss, Issa replied, taking the REP bag from Jessie and setting the blankets out on the ground. Jessie had built the water wall along the eastern facade of the brownstone, inspired by a science class during which her teacher showed them different cartoons of Rube Goldberg machines. The one Jessie loved the most was the cartoon demonstrating a sheet music turner. A guy who looked like a young Beethoven was sitting at a music stand where he was pumping a foot pedal that set off a bunch of reactions, like starting a bike pump that puffed air into a boxing glove that punched a lever that caused a stick to shoot out and turn the page on the music stand. This comic gave Jessie an excellent idea for something to make for Issa, and when she couldn't get the sheet music turner to work, she created the water wall instead. It ended up being a present for Issa's 12th birthday, and Jessie had spent nearly all of June working on it. Jessie brought her water bottle over to the east side of the brownstone, where an industrial metal funnel rested on the roof ledge. Jessie carefully positioned the water bottle in the wire cage, aimed the spout into the base of the funnel, and then unscrewed the bottle cap. The water flowed into the funnel, where it descended through a black hose and settled into a metal container secured to the edge of the building. It then trickled along chutes that zigzagged along the side of the building, causing a series of water wheels with spokes to ping 3 sets of miniature wind chimes as they rotated. Here's a picture of the water wall. Next, the water set off a lever attached to a wooden rainstick, nudging the rainstick to sway back and forth like a lazy seesaw. The water then came to a drop-off where it waterfalled 1 story down to a rounded piece of tin that Jessie had found on the curb coming home from school one day. The tin was magic. It vibrated and produced a different set of sounds depending on what angle the water hit it. Then the water rolled off right into Mama's herb garden and kept the plants hydrated during the growing season, which was probably the only reason she had let Jessie construct the water wall in the first place. A 2-liter bottle of water was enough to keep the water wall's music going for about 15 minutes. The sound from the water wall was what Issa imagined a wind quartet would sound like if the musicians played on a grassy field on a rainy day, with umbrellas to protect the instruments, of course. Issa had been speechless when Jessie unveiled it on her birthday. Jessie had shrugged and said, "It's just physics, no big deal." The music was loud enough for the Vanderbeekers to hear from the roof, but quiet enough not to penetrate the Biederman's soundproof windows. With the water wall singing, the Vanderbeekers gathered at the south side of the brownstone, leaning their elbows along the ledge, except Lainey, who could only rest her fingertips on the ledge and had to be picked up by Issa so she could see over the wall. The south view was the best. From there, they could see the rows of buildings up and down the block. In the distance, City College was lit up on the hill, looking like an ancient castle complete with turrets. "Let's play Listen Without Paying Attention," suggested Lainey. Or, I guess as Lainey would say, "Let's play Listen Without Paying Attention." This was one of her favorite games. She had made it up herself, and it didn't make sense to the rest of the kids until they were in the middle of the game, and then it made perfect sense. "Close your eyes," instructed Lainey. A few moments later, Hyacinth heard the sounds of merengue music coming from one of the apartments down the block. Oliver heard a sliding door opening and their next-door neighbor click a lighter for a cigarette, and Jessie heard unrestrained laughter from a group of people walking down the street on the other side of the building. Issa heard the rainstick's pebbles shift back and forth on the water wall. Lainey, whose eyes were squeezed as tight as she could squeeze them, tried not to hear anything. Still, she heard Miss Josie's rich voice singing a gospel tune. It was amazing what the Vanderbeekers could hear when they weren't trying to listen to anything. Hyacinth's voice interrupted the not listening. "Do you think we'll really stay in Harlem?" "Of course," scoffed Jessie, opening her eyes. "Papa said so." Hyacinth shook her head. "You know, he never really said we'd stay, and he looked sort of weird when he was talking about it. He had that same look he gets when he tells Grandma that he loves that yucky anchovy casserole she always makes when she comes here." "Papa has lived here all his life," Oliver said. "He's like the mayor of our block. He'd never leave. And his computer repair job is here," Jessie pointed out. "He said he would hire me as an assistant when I turned 16. Jessie paused for a nanosecond. "Only 1,257 days to go." "Papa doesn't lie," Lainey said. "Lying is bad news." "I agree, Lainey." Issa looked out at the neighborhood. "This is my favorite view ever," she said. "Do you think the Biederman worked at the castle?" Hyacinth asked, looking at City College. "I thought only nice people were allowed to work in the castle." "Princesses live there," Lainey stated, bracing her arms on Issa's shoulders so she could get a better view. "Princesses do not live there," Oliver said. "That's a college dummy." "Don't call your sister dummy," Hyacinth and Issa said in unison. "Come on," Issa said. "We have work to do." She led her siblings to the blankets, where they sat down for the second meeting of Operation Biederman. Hyacinth handed out the buttons she'd made, and her siblings attached them to their hoodies. "Remember, not a word to Mama and Papa," Jessie reminded them. The Vanderbeeker kids formed a tight circle and did a communal fist bump. "What if we fail?" asked Hyacinth. "We won't," Oliver said, pulling out a startlingly realistic pirate sword that was attached to a belt loop on his jeans and lifting it high in the air. "My idea is for all of us to get swords." "So I've been thinking," Issa interrupted, "that the key to winning the Biederman over is to play our strengths." "Good thing I have so many fine qualities to show off to the Biederman," Oliver boasted. "Who wants to share their ideas first?" asked Issa. "Hyacinth should do the first Biederman mission," Jessie said. "She's the craftiest person in the world." Hyacinth froze. then shook her head in short, quick bursts. Come on, Hyacinth, you're the perfect person to go first. Not too overwhelming. Here, Jessie shot a glance at Lainey, who was busy drawing hearts on everyone's hand with a felt-tip pen she had found in the REP bag, and not too obnoxious. Here, Jessie glared at Oliver, who was trying to untie Issa's sneakers with the tip of his sword. Hyacinth the Brave could totally do it, Issa suggested. Hyacinth continued to shake her head. Since Hyacinth is out, Issa said, surveying her siblings. Jessie, you better go first. Why not you? Said Jessie. Because of our musical disagreements, replied Issa. Her siblings knew it was true. They all thought it was a shame the Biederman reacted so strongly to stringed instruments, especially given Issa's extraordinary progress over the last 6 years. She had left the scary, screechy phase of violin playing shortly after that first year, and had even won a couple of violin competitions recently. Jessie sighed. Fine, send me to my doom, but someone's coming with me. I'll help, I'll do it, Lainey yelled, waving an arm in the air. Shh, said Issa, Jessie, and Hyacinth. I'll help too, Oliver said. Jessie looked over the two candidates. Okay, Lainey, you're in? Hey, what about me? Oliver said. You're a little, Jessie began. What? Demanded Oliver. Unpredictable, suggested Issa. Volatile, added Jessie. Hyacinth didn't say anything, but she gazed at Oliver adoringly. I'm not that bad, said Oliver. No, you're not, for a boy, but you could use some finesse, said Jessie. Finesse, grumbled Oliver. I have so much finesse, you don't even know. The water wall had long stopped singing, and the sky had darkened to an endless black by the time the kids were finishing bouncing ideas back and forth. It turned out that Oliver did have the best idea for the first Operation Biederman. However, even Oliver ultimately agreed he was not the best delivery person. In addition to the baseball and sprinkler incidents, Oliver felt the Biederman had a particular dislike for him because he used to practice dribbling on the sidewalk in front of the brownstone. This bothered no one in the entire neighborhood unless your name was Biederman. Good idea, Oliver, said Issa as she packed up the REP bag. I think this is going to work. See, Oliver said over his shoulder. He swaggered back to the fire escape, his pirate sword swinging from his belt loop. I told you, I got finesse. And that is the end of chapter 4.